unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teachings. In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understandings of teachings and practice, it's offered on the basis of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this is done without expectation of anything in return when the opportunity arises. And those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis. So please support their practice by giving what you can. Liliane very generously gives her dana back to Great Tree, so you can go to the Great Tree website and hit the donate button or the support button on the upper bar. Our speaker today is Dr. Liliane Myoren Papin. Liliane is a Franco-American writer and teacher of Chinese medicine, which she describes as an ecological medicine particularly suited to our times. She practices and teaches acupuncture, herbology, qigong, and dietary therapy. Her books are The Treasures of Chinese Medicine for Today's World, The Great Book of Daoist Medicine, Immunity, Special Edition, and Dare Sea Vegetables, Therapeutic and Culinary Uses of Sea Vegetables, which she co-wrote with her husband, Didier. The title of her talk today is Winter Teachings, Breathing Through Darkness. Welcome, Liliane.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. Okay, thank you for having me today. So I will try to share a little bit of what I try to have as wisdom from Chinese medicine, Taoism, and how it intersects with Buddhist practice. So the title is Breathing Through Darkness. And to begin with, I'd like to share something with you. And some of you are going to recognize it because you're starting to be very familiar with that. So here, all right. It's what is called sometimes the 5 elements, and which, and I'm not the only one to say that, is not really correct. It's better to say the 5 transformations because it's a spiral, always changing into one another. So when we talk about breathing into darkness, where we are situated is right here. You see water element, kidney, bladder, and it corresponds to the season of winter. And so, and you can see those 5 transformations, those 5 energies, also as the way a day evolves, for example. So the kidney bladder energy corresponds to nighttime. So very often people have worsening of symptoms during the night. I'm not going to go into too much into that. That would take us too away from the topic. But and so you could see here, it could be the morning or it can be spring. Here it can be noon or it can be summer. It can be here afternoon or it can be late, Indian summer. That's usually what we call it. And then here is the fall or evening. So basically those energies correspond to different areas and the emotions are right there. So the 5 emotions that are linked to that, and today I'm going to talk a bit more about fear, which is, fear of the dark and how to deal with darkness, which when you understand fear, make it big. So fear is a kind of word that includes all the shades of fear: timidity, anxiety, terror, panic, So it's a wide word. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. And what I'd like you to see, because it has some relevance to what we're going to see today, is you see this cycle here, which is called the engendering cycle, that the lung is the mother of kidney. Metal energy is the mother of water energy. So think of it as mineral water. You know, in order to be pure, water has to be mineralized. That's why it runs over rocks. So metal, that's all of that. Crystal, stones. So metal energy is the mother of water energy, meaning it nourishes it. Okay. And you see that kidney bladder is the mother of liver, gallbladder, or of wood, meaning again, water nourishes wood. That one is simple enough to see, right? And then we have a cycle inside. You see, it is called usually a control cycle. I personally don't really care for that word. I think it's better to talk about a balancing cycle. But it can, because it's a balancing cycle, when it is out of balance, there can be an over controlling or destructive aspect. So, for example, water balances fire. You know, when it's hot, we like to drink. That's the balancing cycle. When it's hot, we like coolness, balancing cycle. However, of course, we can say also that water extinguishes fire, and it can be good or bad depending on the circumstances. So that's the balancing cycle. Why am I saying that? Because we're going to talk about water energy and fear and darkness and night. So personally, what I like so much about the Taoist tradition is that those energies apply to all areas of life. It can be applied to chemistry, it can be applied to physical things, to time. So, what that means is you can see how the lung is the mother of kidney. So, that means we can see very easily how indeed breathing is a way to ease fear. You know, when we're afraid, before going on stage, before, you know, we know that taking a breath, a deep breath, usually helps. Lung is the mother of kidney, metal is the mother of water, and breathing is also the mother to nourish kidney and help us deal with fear. And kidney is the mother of liver, and in liver gallbladder, you find anger, resentment, shouting. Those are sometimes called negative emotions, and we're going to come back to that. And we know that very often, when we are afraid and when fear takes hold of us, we resort to anger. Right? Part of the reason for that is here we're in the night, in the cooling, in the cold area. So, of course, resorting to anger gives an upward energy that can help get out of that being stuck in fear. However, if we look at it, it's neither good nor bad. It could be anger or it could be an initiative. And again, we'll come back to that in a moment. Kidney bladder, as you see, or fear, also balances the heart or controls the heart, as it is said. So, meaning that when we're in fear, it is very difficult to love. We more easily go to anger than we will go to love. However, love, or getting through breathing, getting to love, to the aspect of light, to, when we are afraid and suddenly we can kind of go above and see the situation from a different angle and get to more understanding, then it can ease the fear. So it's not only physical, it can be applied to our emotions, and it's only our own ignorance, lack of awareness that makes us separate emotions and body. Look, for example, when we are afraid, or even if we are shy, how suddenly our cheeks are going to get red. And for that to happen, there's an amazing process within the body to get the blood to the cheeks and make it red. There's, the heart, the blood in the veins. It's a whole, some hormones, it's a whole process that happens. By the same token, we know that when there is heavy trauma in the body, of course, it's going to create emotions too. So they're not really separated. And another thing that I want you to look at here is that slowly over years, as I've been teaching Chinese medicine and Taoism, I came to realize that even fear, anxiety, anger, resentment, those are not negative energies. They just part of that particular headquarter, let's say. So I'm going to stop here with this. So as I've been pondering that, the fact that realize that fear didn't mean it's an emotion that's located in the kidneys, that the kidneys administer, so to speak, that it didn't make fear negative. And last year with Tejo, we had a little group, a study group, where we studied how we live is how we die. And I want to read you something from that book. He said it's Trungpa Rinpoche, who was one of the teachers of Pema Chodron, and she quotes him as saying, Rinpoche said that we experience negativity as terribly unpleasant, foul-smelling, something we want to get rid of. And we can all relate to that, especially, I think, when we are on a path like meditation, sitting, Buddhism, whatever path considered a spiritual path, we tend to see emotions as disturbances. And if you look at many articles on spirituality, it will talk about disturbing emotion, and that's often the way they are seen. Kind of, we need to transcend our emotions, be above our emotions, especially when it comes to emotions like anger, fear, those negative ones that seem to block us and take hold of us and are so powerful. So, but he went on, if we look into it more deeply, it has a very juicy smell and is very alive. It is living and precise connected with reality. And that really hit me when I read that, because I was expressing that through the five energies, how I had come to the conclusion that fear was not to be seen as a negative emotion, because in Chinese medicine, we often present it as such. And it is true that if we live in fear, there will be consequences on our kidney health. So it can indeed bring disease. And however, it's not all that it is. And when I saw especially the word very juicy smell, I thought, whoa, that's interesting. And how can we practice with our own emotions and our own negativities, all that we struggle with, and make it so that we consider it juicy, alive, close to reality? How in the world can we practice that? And so when it comes to fear and kidney, which is darkness and winter, and think of it as winter, the season, and of course, dark times of history, the feeling of darkness in politics, whatever darkness is associated with. So if you look at fear, really, indeed, every single sentient being on earth knows fear. You touch a snail and it retracts into its shell. Same with a worm. Birds are on the lookout. Any animal, any living being knows fear. So, and we are equipped to deal with fear. In our body, it is through our adrenals, right? We know, which is part of kidney. We know what we call the fight and flight response. And it enables us, it makes our heart beat faster, it enables us to run faster, to escape a danger. So really, fear is a signal in our body. And again, every single living being experiences fear, is ready for fear, and is equipped to deal with fear. And so in Western medicine, we acknowledge that through the adrenals and the fight and flight response. Nowadays, we tend to add a third aspect. There's the fight, we know that one, the flight response, and we see that in animals. Some animals respond to fear preferably, if they can, with flight. That's the case of birds, most birds. That's the case of cats. That's the case of most herbivorous animals, right? And there are some animals that are equipped more with attack. The third one is actually paralysis, being, motionless, shock. And it has come in courts of justice because sometimes the lack of reaction of a victim was taken as an indication that that victim did not really fight, especially in cases of rape, that the victim really did not fight and was actually consenting. And we, again, if we look at the animal world, we can see that in cases of fear, some animals in some circumstances get paralyzed. A deer with the light. And when the shock is strong, there's a paralysis. So, and those are the three responses that we have. And of course, some animals do choose to hide. And those three responses actually are, again, neither good nor bad. So, all of that to say that when we deal with fear, and God knows, I think, that we are in times of fear in many parts of the world. We know things are changing quickly. Our earth is changing, the climate is changing, politics are changing, there's hate surging. There's a lot happening. So we all know fear, what it causes around us and in us. So, knowing that we are equipped with fear and that fear is a human emotion that nobody is ignorant of. Or if you're ignorant of fear, it can be actually a pathology. So, and we are equipped. So all those three reactions, again, are neither good nor bad. They are three options that we have. So, and you saw the five energies. The thing is where Trungpa Rinpoche said, juicy is you realize that indeed it is part of life, and fear is meant as a signal to enable us to respond, to be alive. And in Buddhism, in particular in Tibetan Buddhism, but I think in all schools of Buddhism, it is said that fear is the most fundamental emotion of human beings, and maybe and probably every sentient being, that we experience fear with birth. There's that birthing itself is a process of going through fear, of leaving the cocoon of water where the mother breathes for us, feeds us, and then going through the birth canal, and suddenly being exposed to air, to temperature, to bright lights very often if it's in a hospital and if there's no attention to that, all kinds of circumstances of birth, and leaving the cocoon. And it's a downward movement, it's a fall, right? And then being exposed and terribly vulnerable, because as small infants, we are unable to survive on our own. And it can be sometimes, I think, rather comforting. Um, when I feel intimidated, I have kept in mind what I had read. I can't remember where, but I had read that sometimes when you feel intimidated by someone, it's a helpful practice to imagine them on the toilet. And so I use that, but now also I like to use the idea of that powerful or bragging or whatever human being as a small crying baby or on a deathbed, because that's our common identity. And however noisy, however bragging we can be, and of course, anger has a lot to do with that. Anger is probably the most ostentatious of all the emotions, makes you feel like a bully, can make you feel strong, and of course, often people resort to anger. It's one of the clashes that is resorted to when we deal with anger. So knowing that we all share that beginning and that end, and that we are so vulnerable, is a way also of dealing with our fear. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, we still have that baby, that frightened baby in us, afraid of darkness. And again, you can conjugate it in any way you want, night, whatever represents darkness. And we still have that child and that infant in us. It never disappears. And one of the things that's difficult about fear is that it's an emotion that we don't like, that is not regarded as cool usually. So, and I think especially for men or the masculine area, the more macho attitude is you don't admit to fear. A word, of course, that corresponds to fear is coward. And it's an easy insult. And so telling people they are cowards is to make them ashamed of their fear. Right? So there's much cultural input in terms of how emotions are viewed. Right now, I think we are witnessing the fact that through media, through social media and everything, anger is more and more seen as okay to relate to others, right? While fear, you don't want to show you are afraid, right? And especially if we talk about war. Right now, unfortunately, in France, there's the word war is floating around quite a bit. And there's a campaign to recruit soldiers in high schools and universities. And so lots of posters have appeared to encourage young people to register and to enlist. And that's what the posters always play upon, about if you have the courage, find the courage in you. I've seen several posters say that. And if you don't want to be a coward in the face of adversity, that kind of language. There's also, of course, you can help others, which is another way of enlisting. But the play on fear and cowardice is very much present. So how can we find, when we are in times of darkness or facing darkness in our lives, like we all do, like all people of the earth do, how can it still feel juicy, like Rinpoche said? How can we find fear juicy? How can we deal with it? And I think that understanding fear, if I went there with you today, can help us. Number one, to recognize that we can peel off labels of emotions. That fear is, period. Fear exists, period. That doesn't say anything about how we deal with fear, but fear, in my understanding, and really I invite you to explore it, of course, for yourself, the way I see fear as juicy is that it's inseparable. Is that how you say that in English? Yes, inseparable from the will to live. We are equipped to, to, for fight and flight, and also for hiding. So all of those are actually can be good strategies to deal with fear. In some cases, you need to attack. In some cases, it's better to flee. In some cases, it's better to hide and be motionless. And so, number one is to again peel off labels of good or bad and to learn to recognize our fear. One of the difficulties with fear is because it is part of kidney energy, part of night. So it's the most unconscious. It's so deep. It goes back to our first breath. So it's so deep that it can look very sophisticated. We have very sophisticated ways of hiding our fear through attack, flight, and hiding as well. Because these, no label there. They can be correct responses or they can be avoidance responses or hiding responses. So those give us ways, and I mentioned before how we saw that lung is the mother of kidney. So lung breathing is also the mother of fear. So of course, breathing, and I don't need to tell you that because you're practicing it. Breathing is one way to look at fear and not identify with it. It's always the same process, right? We need not to identify with the emotion, neither good nor bad. It is. And when it's here, the infant in us is right with us. So Thich Nhat Hanh, again, one of the things that he says is when fear is present, breathe into your abdomen. Don't stay in your head, and even breathing, don't keep it in your throat or in your chest. Make it as deep as possible. And in Qigong, we even practice, through different exercising, breathing through the feet. We are equipped for that as well. Our feet have a point inside that kind of takes energy from the earth. Anyway, the breathing through the abdomen is one way of dealing with fear. And he says because, and he has a book that's called actually Fear, Essential Wisdom for Getting Through the Storm. And so he does compare a panic attack, an attack of fear, as a storm. And therefore, we need to anchor ourselves when fear is present. And the most rooting energy is in our lower body. That's why you are sitting cross-legged, right? That's the most stable way. So coming back to the breath and breathing through the abdomen is one thing. And when we don't add an extra layer of judgment on our emotions, when they're naked, when we meet them with compassion, with love. If you think of a baby, when we see a baby so vulnerable, if we are, I want to say if we are normal, We want to protect that baby. We feel its vulnerability. We try to make the baby smile. If it cries, we want to see what's wrong, right? And in our world and the way along the centuries or millennia, we have separated matter and earth from air and from feelings and from mind and from mental. We have so separated them that, we tend to slap ourselves when we have emotions we don't like. I shouldn't feel that. I shouldn't be that way. I know it's stupid to feel that way, but, all the ways we have, or we don't want to tell others because of, again, we are afraid of people's judgments. And again, knowing that if we breathe, we can see with more clarity, and that we are equipped. We are equipped to deal with fear. And there are responses to fear. Which one might be the most appropriate at this very moment to deal with darkness? So if a child is afraid of darkness, how do we deal with that? It's not necessarily by telling them, no, there's nothing, you're crazy, just go back to sleep. There can be different ways, but certainly is to reassure the child. And we don't often do that with our own emotions. So one thing that Thich Nhat Hanh also recommends is, the inner dialogue, if we have the time or if we are, because sometimes the fear can be so overwhelming that we need to get away from it for a while. I mean, meaning sitting or taking some time. And so he says, imagine the child sitting on a cushion. You put two cushions, and one is the child and one is the adult, and you go from one to the other. When you're on one cushion, you are the little child who is afraid. And you talk in the most simple ways possible. Nothing sophisticated. I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I might get killed. I'm afraid to get murdered. I'm afraid to look foolish. People won't like me. Whatever, in very simple child's words. And then to go onto the other cushion and be the adult. And yes, I hear you. And yes, I understand the fear, which is most often legitimate. There can be paranoia, of course, but most often it is legitimate. And to take care of that fear. I'm the adult and I'm going to think about what you're saying. I'm thinking about what you're saying, what you're feeling, and I can come up with the best ways to deal with the situation. So that's one of the antidotes that he recommends. Another thing that's important, and that's the gift of the Daoist tradition, is that what it tells us is if we want to be able to best deal with fear, we need to take care of our kidneys. Right? Fear is a descending energy. I'm sure you can feel that if you compare it to anger. Anger is an upward energy. Fear can paralyze. Fear can make you feel empty and powerless. So it's a descending energy. And of course, it is used in many cases because through humiliation, in torture, humiliation is one of the most used weapons. And of course, in cases of intense fear, be it animals or human beings, there can be incontinence and fecal or urinary incontinence. We can literally empty ourselves, which can be very humiliating. And of course, it is used. Unfortunately, it has been used by human beings along centuries and millennia to humiliate people in various circumstances. So, again, I think that if we see that we all have the same emotion, the same material available to deal with emotions, and that we need to take care of our body. So there is not much time here to go into the care of kidney energy. But for example, in Chinese medicine, the sensory aspect of kidney is hearing, the ears and hearing. So listening to our fear and listening to other people's fears without judging is also an important antidote. Taking care of our kidney also means good health, good food, because we know that one thing in particular is blood sugar. So, for example, if we experience a high from either alcohol or drugs, we know that it's followed by a downward spiral. And in that case, that's when, people who are trying who run out of drugs, or we are trying to clean to cleanse their body of drugs. That's where they experience a lot of paranoia, a lot of fear. The down can be peopled by nightmares. And I think if any of you has drunk too much at any point, you know that the next morning or the night following is not particularly pleasant. The body reacts, maybe vomits, but there's also that heaviness of spirit, that downward, and in that downward spiral, we are particularly vulnerable to fear, to other people, to circumstances. We don't have the reflexes, the fight and flight response. Of course, we don't have it under drug or under alcohol or at that time, but even after, when there's a downward spiral, all those, because the kidney is the center of our reflexes, according to Chinese medicine. So that's where everything we never asked for, but we got. So, the color of our hair, although nowadays we can change that, but the color of our eyes, the shape of our body, our teeth, the ancestry we have, the color of our skin, all of that is kidney energy. All the reflexes we have, so fight and flight, that's a reflex that was given to us through the universe to help us deal with fear. We are ready for fear, right? So we can call upon that to deal with our fears and learn and to get familiar with it. So I think this model, and maybe I will stop with that. I think what I really enjoy. Oh, I wanted to give you a couple more examples of how to take care of kidney. So blood sugar, even blood sugar is certainly one. Um, Good salt, because kidney is water energy. It's our ocean. So a salt of good quality is very important. And nowadays, with hypertension, we see a lot of this imbalance between the heart and the kidney, the water and the fire. The fire is too much, and there's not enough water. The water tables are empty. So it's true on our earth, in our ecology, it's true in our body. We tend to have too much energy upward in the mind, mental energy, and while our kidneys are empty. And of course, overly salty food, in particularly with the bad sodium or salt. So doctors say don't use salt, if you have hypertension, or reduce salt. But really, it's not salt, it's sodium. And commercial salt is pure sodium. So a good quality salt. So these are just a few examples of how taking care of our body is actually also taking care of our emotions. And so anything related to kidney is helping us deal with fear and darkness and breathing into darkness. So maybe I'm going to stop here and give you a few minutes to either ask questions if you have any, or comments. Um,
Um, yes, hi. Thank you so much. It's Chris. Hi. Thank you,
you're
Lily,
welcome,
so
Krista.
much. I have a question about the book you mentioned. Um, Fear, Essential Wisdom for Getting Through the Storm. But
Yes,
I missed the who wrote that? Who?
Thich Nhat Hanh. Maybe I
Oh,
Thich
okay.
Nhat Hanh.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um,
I wanted to ask you all actually, if you're willing to share maybe some of your biggest fears. Are you aware of some of your biggest fears? They're
um,
actually easier to see than
mhm.
the most tricky ones, the one that we don't see right away. Yeah?
Oh, I'll just say not having meaning in life. Just what's the meaning of life? I don't know sometimes.
Okay.
I think for me, it would probably be my like giving up on my dreams.
Okay.
I find the ocean pretty scary and all the things
You
that we
find what? What
the ocean.
the ocean scary. Okay. It's interesting. You're getting, I mean, except for the ocean, because here I think we're in a fundamental fears, but not but, I would invite you to look at the fundamental fears that we have. Um, like in Tibetan Buddhism, they say we all have the fear of annihilation, disappearing, right? We all have the fear of abandonment, of being humiliated. So some of those, again, they might be difficult to articulate, but they are very much often behind what the most obvious fears seem to be. Does it make sense? For example, if I may, Christine, you said no meaning in life. And I think if we peel off the layers, I think we would find that if life is nothing, then that means there's no meaning, I'm nothing. And there's the fear of nothingness, of no meaning. So we are of annihilation as a fundamental fear.
I don't understand what you mean by elation and elation.
Oh, annihilation. Again, it might be my accent. That's
Annihilation.
what do you say?
Annihilation.
Annihilation. So of disappearing, of death, being, not existing. No, it's not alienation. It's annihilation. It's I will tell you how I write it. Maybe it's a French word. A
Not
double.
it's in English.
Okay, so that's the one.
What?
The
I
one
didn't.
that she wrote on the chat. Anyway,
Oh, okay. All right.
okay.
Mhm.
So, which again, it's that's one of the teachings, including in Tibetan to Buddhism, or in many schools of Buddhism, is the fear of nothingness.
May I ask a question, please?
Please.
Thank you for your teaching. How does empathy and the earth relate to fear and water?
Well, it's what balances fear. So, well, one example is maybe what I shared with you of how my own understanding that all beings, all earthlings share fear. How it gives more compassion for everyone involved, including me, and it's still an awareness, but to realize that fear, I need not be judgmental of my own fear, and sharing it with empathy with other people is a way also to relate to my own. There's no difference. In terms of what you're asking, we see it has a lot to do with blood sugar too, because earth is stomach and spleen. So blood sugar earth energy can actually help fear. And that's the image of the Buddha touching the earth as a witness, to be entitled to awakening, when Mara was saying, who do you think you are? Right? So when we ground ourselves, and the word itself, grounding ourselves, when we come back to the reality, the juicy reality that we're very fragile human beings and we are all equipped the same way. And we are earthlings. So the earth energy, the empathy of earth can definitely help us accept our shortcomings and everybody else's shortcomings, which doesn't mean not to choose how we want to deal with it through fight, flight, or, those are all options for fear. But so it helps us deal with fear, not identify with fear.
Thank you.
That's a good question. All right, so I think I will stop here. Maybe just a little anecdote to finish, which is I had realized it was one moment of, discovering a fear, a hidden fear, one that my ego did not quite acknowledge. I had realized when I was taking a shower in the morning that sometimes under the shower, I would have those imaginary discussions with people I was mad at. And, like, why he said that, she said that. And, when I became aware of that, and I realized I became aware that, it did happen quite a bit in the morning. And I thought, what's going on with that? Why am I having those fits of anger or discussions or ruminating about things that happened before? What is it? And finally, it dawned on me that those were the mornings when I had something scary scheduled. And it could be many things. It could be a talk, it could be teaching, it could be an administrative task, it can be filing taxes, it could be many things. And that was the little child, the child afraid of the adult world and not liking it a bit, not wanting to get out. And so, and so I realized, that under all the sophistication, there was fear there, a very basic fear, simple. It can be having to talk to someone, a discussion I was afraid of. And if you had asked my mental self, oh, well, it's okay, no problem, the sophisticated aspect. So just to say that fear sometimes is more difficult to touch because it's hidden, it's unconscious. And so there's need to go toward it, encourage, look at it, and acknowledge it before we can deal with it.
Thank you so much, Liliane.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a couple of announcements before we give back the merit. Tomorrow there's an Intro to Zen class that's on Zoom only. So if you're new to the practice and you want to learn more about that, come on Zoom tomorrow. I also want to mention there will be we're offering the precepts in May. So if you're interested in receiving the precepts, it's a bit of a process. It involves sewing a rakusu, which is the bib that some of these people are wearing. That you do that during the sewing retreat in March. So if you're interested in receiving the precepts in May, email me as soon as you can at info@greattreetemple.org to get that set up. There's also a bunch of recent Dharma talks about the precepts if you're interested in learning more about that. Our speaker for next weekend, for actually the next 2 weekends, will be our own Genjo. His talks, I think both of those talks will be about, the title is Zen Meets Mental Health, Embracing the Three Minds. So, a little bit of practical mental health knowledge.
Three talks, I think.
Oh, three.
There's a third.
There is a third. That's right. Okay, there's a third. 3-part series. 3-part series. So look forward to that for the next, I guess, 3 or so weekends. And yeah, I think that's it.
May the merit of this practice
May the merit of this practice
benefit all beings.
benefit all beings
And bring peace.
and bring peace. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.